Hi, welcome to the part 5 of this video series where I'm covering the Azure DP 200 exams real questions. I would request you to please subscribe to my channel so that you can keep getting in more information related to certifications. This channel is totally a cloud certification related channel where a lot of concepts of cloud and real exam questions related to cloud certifications is discussed. To prepare for this exam, uh, it would require approximately 45 hours of work. I would request you to put 2 to 3 hours for 15 to 20 days. That will help you clear this exam. Let's jump to the questions. Let's see our first question. You are designing an application that will have an Azure virtual machine. The virtual machine will access Azure SQL database. The database will not be accessible from the internet. This is very critical information. The database will not be accessible from the internet. That means it can only be accessed through private network. You recommend, you need to recommend a solution to provide the required level of access to the database. So among these options, let's go one by one. Option A. So option A suggests deploy an on-premises data gateway. So on-premises data gateway provides secure data transfer between on-premises data sources and Azure Analytical Service. Azure Analytics Service is the key here. Okay. But our answer says we have to connect to a Azure SQL database and not an analysis service. That's why data gateway is of not much of use. Plus, if you see, it also says we will have an Azure virtual machine. From the Azure virtual machine, you have to provide this access. So we are not talking about on-premises here. Azure virtual machine is on the cloud. Hence, A is wrong. Then let's see option B, add a virtual network to Azure SQL Server that hosts the database. So the Azure Virtual Network, if you see, it's a fundamental building block for your private network in Azure. So this will be our answer because virtual network is used to create private networks, and here we already saw the keyword is not be accessible from the internet. That means it will be accessible from the private network. So B is right. Let's see option C and D as well. Add an application gateway to virtual network. Application gateway is a load balancer. Here we don't need a load balancer. We need a private network. So C is striked out. D says add a virtual network gateway to a virtual network. So first we have to create a virtual network. And then only we can build network gateways. Network gateways is for encryption of data in the virtual network. So here the question first, the basic point is first create the private network using a virtual network. So D is wrong. D is wrong here. So B is our correct answer. So let's go to the next question. So the question goes this way: you have an on-premises MySQL database that is 800 GB in size. You need to migrate a MySQL database to Azure. So basically, um, so you have MySQL database on premises. You have to move it to Azure MySQL. This is the question, and you have to move it with minimized service interruption to live sites or applications that use the database. So these are the recommendations. So whenever you want to move, you have to migrate the data. Always use database migration service. This gives us migration service with minimal interruption. So this is the database migration service, and it says fully managed service designed to enable seamless migrations from multiple data sources to Azure data platforms with minimal downtime. These are all online migrations. There is no downtime, hardly any downtime. So option A looks correct. Let's see other options. Option B, dump and restore. See, if you dump and restore, there will be always downtime. And even with C, import there will be a downtime because you will take the import and then you will export it. And so B and C both are wrong. Let's see option D, MySQL Workbench. So this is just like SQL Plus, where you use it to connect to the database so that you can fire queries easily, etc. So this is not used for migration. This is wrong answer. So our problem is solved. A is the right answer. Let's see the next question. So what it's saying is you have to migrate some databases to Azure SQL database, maybe from on-premises, etc. You have the following requirements. You have to organize the databases into groups based on database usage, and you define the maximum resource limit available for each group of databases. You need to recommend which technology is useful to support expected increases in demands. So let's see the first option, read scale out. So read scaled out is scaling out your reads. You can have multiple replicas for your reads. So that will not work because you will have to organize databases for reads and writes both. Azure managed instances. If you see managed instances, so what is the difference between SQL database managed instance compared to SQL database? So SQL database you have to yourself install on VM, and it gives you very low level access to create different sort of databases, etc. And managed instance will not allow that access. So here, in order to organize databases into groups on database usage and uh, define a maximum resource limit, you will need that level of control. So managed instances will not work here. Let's look at elastic pools. This looks correct because it allows you to organize databases into groups. So if elastic pools was not available, you were either over provisioning the resources or under provisioning the resources to save the cost. So elastic pools solve this problem. If you see here, it is a pool shared by multiple databases to accommodate unpredictable periods of usage. And you can set minimum and maximum resources for the databases. So this takes care of both the points, organizing databases into groups and maximum resource limit for each database or group of database. Database sharding is basically database partitioning. You can do a vertical sharding or horizontal sharding. So this will not apply for this problem statement. Let's see the next question. Let's look at the next question. So the company is evaluating data storage solutions, and these are the requirements. Minimize costs for storing blob objects. So you have to minimize costs. That means out of this, archive will be cheapest. Optimize access for data that is infrequently accessed. So in this case, it should be cold because it has both minimize costs and infrequent access. Archive is for rare access. Data must be stored for at least 30 days. That fits with the definition of cold. If you see the documentation, stored for at least 30 days. Data availability must be at least 99%. So usually for hot instances, data availability is 99.99 some that figure. Here if you see for cool access tier, you can tolerate lower availability. So for cool tier, a slightly lower availability service SLA and higher access cost compared to hot are acceptable trade-offs for lower storage costs. So cold is the right answer. There is no premium tier here. If you see here, hot, cool, and archive only. Let's jump to the next question. So this question is on redundancy types. So a company is designing a solution that uses Azure Databricks. The solution must be resilient to regional Azure data center outages. So this is the keyword. It should be resilient to the regional data center outages. That means if in one region, if your application is deployed in one region and all the data centers in that region, there is a outage. So you should recommend a solution for this. So obviously, if in this case, geo redundant storage will work because you will have redundancy means duplication. So you will have two regions having the same application. So if one region, this region, there is full outage of all the data centers, then the other region will still work. Let's scan through the options. It will not work because you will also need write access. Just read access to geo redundant storage will not work. Locally redundant storage will also not work because um, if you see locally redundant storage, it replicates your data three times within the same physical location in the primary region. So if that region itself is going down, that's our question. So this option will not help you because that region is gone down. So entire all three versions or all three copies will go down. So regions zones are in regions. If one region has three zones and the entire region, like it's saying the regional data center outages, so the entire region means all the zones has also gone down, so this will not work. So zone redundant storage is also striked out. So the correct answer is geo redundant storage. Let's look at the next question. The next question, so this question is on disaster recovery solution. So and this is linked to Azure SQL database managed instance. So the requirement is that the database should automatically recover when full or partial loss of the SQL database service happens in the primary region. Let's look at the options. Failover group. So this looks correct because you use failover groups to enable transparent and coordinated failover of multiple databases. So if you read this documentation, this is what the question is asking for. So this line answers it. It manages the replication and failover of a group of databases on a server or all databases in a managed instance to another region. So how the failover happens is any outage that impacts one or several of the databases in the group results in automatic failover. So we got our answer. We will still go through the other options. Data sync is just used to sync two databases, and if there are any incremental updates coming in, it will set the sync. So this doesn't apply for disaster recovery. There is nothing called SQL replication separately. It's a part of active geo replication. So we will strike this out. Active geo replication. It only allows you to create readable secondary databases of individual databases on a server in a different data center. So it will only create a readable secondary database, but we want read and write both. And if you see failover group, it auto failover groups provide read write and read only listener endpoints. It provides both. So we will strike out option D. So we got the correct answer, which is option A, failover group. Let's look at the next question. You are developing a solution that performs real-time analysis of IoT data in the cloud. The solution must remain available during Azure services update. So this is for real-time analysis of IoT data. So Azure Stream Analytics is used for that. We need to choose two options. So Azure Stream Analytics, if usually what we do is we create a pair, a region pair, and that is used uh, to remain available during Azure service updates. So this option A is wrong because they are not in a pair. Option B suggests deploy these jobs in each region in a paired region. This is right. So if you see this documentation, it says it is recommended to deploy identical jobs to both paired regions, and then you should then monitor these jobs to get notified when something unexpected happens. So this is correct. Let's look out for one more option because you have two actions to choose. C states monitor jobs in both regions for failure. So that is what we saw. You then monitor these jobs to get and identified. So you deploy in both the regions and you monitor in both the regions. this works only with paired regions. Since we got our two answers, option D suggests monitor jobs in the primary region for failure. No, it should monitor in both the regions. So we'll strike this out. So option E suggests deploy the job in one region in a paired region. No, it should deploy in both the regions. So the right option is R, B, and C. Let's look at the next question. So a company is developing a solution to manage inventory data for a group of automotive repair shops. So what they are doing is they use SQL data warehouse, and the shops will upload data every 10 days. So just they want to ensure that a corruption check is done when the data is uploaded, and if a corruption is detected, the corrupted data must be removed. This is a normal process. You're loading your data every time to database, and just before you're loading, you are making a corruption check. So you need to ensure that the upload process and data corruption do not impact reporting. So do not impact reporting. By that, what we mean is it should not be like we upload the data and then we see the data is corrupted, and now we have to delete that data, and we don't know from which point we have to delete. So we truncate the database and reload the entire, and that will have a downtime, and that is not desirable here. So the proposed solution says configure database level auditing and set retention to 10 days. Now, if you see database level auditing, it has a different purpose. It tracks database events and writes them to audit log. It is not tracking the data. It's tracking different events of the data of the database, and it will put it in a log analytics workspace or event hubs. So this is a different purpose. Hence, the right option would be no. Let's look at the next one. This is your question. The company is developing a solution to manage inventory. Same question that we discussed before, but the option is different here. So the option here says create a user-defined restore point before data is uploaded. Delete the restore point after data corruption checks are complete. So this is the right option. You can use restore points. There are two ways: automatic or manual restore points. So what it does is that the moment you are uploading the data, so before that you do a restore point. You create a restore point, and if the data is corrupted and during the load or after the load you find the data is corrupted, you can restore back to the corruption point. Sorry, to the restore point. So that will have minimal impact on the other reporting processes, like mentioned in this question. Hence, yes is the correct answer. So let's see question. The next question. So we have the same question, but the proposed solution here is changed. So it says insert data from shops and perform the data corruption checks in a transaction. Rollback transfer if corruption is detected. This will not work because see, a rollback or rollback segments, whatever is used, it can only hold certain amount of data sets. For large data sets, if you are doing it, you will not be able to roll it back. You will have to restore it from a point. So this answer is wrong. Let's see the next question. You have an Azure SQL database that has columns. The columns are sensitive columns, PIA, and you need to design a solution that tracks and stores all queries executed against the PI data. You must be able to review that data in Azure Monitor, and the data must be available for 45 days. So the solution says you execute a daily stored procedure that retrieves queries from query store. Look up the column classifications and store the results in your database. So this answer is wrong because in order to first you have to add classifications to the columns which are marked as PII. That is the thing that is needed, and then only you can enable audit so that you can monitor this through Azure Monitor. So this option is totally wrong. So no, no is the answer here. No, the same question but a different solution it has. You add classifications. So this is the next question. So you add classifications to the columns that contain sensitive data. You turn on auditing and set the audit log destination to Azure Log Analytics. That is perfectly correct. If you see what Azure Monitor does is it can detect and diagnose issues and etc. You can create visualizations using Azure dashboards. It will monitor those stuff, and you can also drill into your monitoring data using log analytics. That's what our question says. So our question says is you turn on auditing and send the audit log destination to Azure Log Analytics. That is perfectly okay. And the retention here they say the data must be available for at least 45 days. So if you see Azure Log Analytics retention is configurable now by data type. So you can set a value, any value, any retention you can put. So the configurable values are between 30 to 730 days. And the question is asking for 45 days, which is well under the limit. So this answer should be yes. Let's jump to the next question. Let's move to the next question. Do you have a Azure storage account and you plan to copy 1 million image files to the storage account and you plan to share the files with an external partner organization? So let me show you in front of diagram. You have a storage account and this storage account uh, plans to copy 1 million files. I mean, we plan to copy 1 million files. So these blue ones are files. Now you have an external vendor to whom you want to give access. So this external vendor, it can read and write from the storage account. This is the question. So now the problem statement says ensure that only the partner organization can have access to a storage account. So only this vendor should be able to access. Other people should not be able to access. And ensure that the access of the partner organization is removed automatically after 365 days. Okay. So they just need temporary access. So when we need temporary access, shared access signature is the tool available in Azure. If you see this, there is an article grant limited access to Azure storage resources using SaaS. So SaaS provides secure delegated access, and you also have granular level control how the client can access your data. For example, what resources the client may access, what permissions they may choose over those resources, and how long the SaaS is valid. You can make it 365 days or any number of days as well. So you have user delegation SaaS, service SaaS, account SaaS, three types of SaaS. For example, Azure Blob Storage Lifecycle Management. So this is used to move from hot to cold areas of the storage. This is a lifecycle management. The moment a certain set of files are not used frequently, it is moved to the cold storage, and if it is used very rarely, it is moved to the archive storage. So the purpose is very different, and it's not suitable for this question. Azure policies. The policies are used to enforce organizational standards and to assess compliance at scale. Okay, it's a different purpose. It's not used to provide external access. If we look at shared keys, so it generates a key 512-bit storage account, and using that key you can access these things. So can external user be given this key? Yes, they can be given, but then they will have access to all the objects in that account, and you would not have granular access to give access only to particular set of files or only read access, etc. That granularity will not have. Hence, A also will be wrong in this case. So D is the right option. Let's look at the next question. So here it says you are designing security for admin access uh, to Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So I was just making some correction here. So this is your SQL Data Warehouse, and you have this admin. So what happens is if you have to get access, and they are asking for two-factor authentication. So using two-factor authentication, how you can get it? Let's understand PIM first. What is PIM? So this is privileged identity management, and this is primarily used for reasons like you want to give privileged access to certain critical resources and admin access, then you can give that. But this will not help you solve this question. So if you see the other option, Vault, this one Azure Key Vault Secrets. This is used to store secret key data. Okay. Not something that we need here. Let's look at option D, identity protection. This is the documentation. Identity protection allows you to automate the detection and remediation of identity-based risks, investigate risks, and export risk detection. So I'll strike option D off as well. So option A is our answer. So conditional access policy. It based on if-then statement, it can provide access. It is used, for example, here you see example, payroll manager wants to access payroll application and is required to perform multi-factor authentication. So this sort of setting you can do here. Hence, this is the right option. Let's look at the next question. So basically, this question says is you want to access Azure Data Lake from your Databricks and using service principle. So what should you include? So when we talk about service principle, it is if you see this, Azure Service Principle is an identity created for use with applications hosted. So you provide roles and privileges to the service principle in the Active Directory. Let's look at the options. Option A, shared access key. So this is a temporary access that we give to data lake storage, but here there is no requirement for temporary access. Nothing specifically says that. So this option is striked out. The other option says access keys in data lake storage. So this is also, if you want to provide access to the overall storage account, you can provide access keys and do it. But in this case, since it is saying service principle always works through a application register in the Active Directory. It doesn't work through access keys alone. First step is you have to register the application in Active Directory. So that is first step. Hence, I'm striking B. C says an org relationship in AD. You do not kind of maintain AD org relationship. You have to register it in AD first. That leaves us with option D. And this is the right answer, option D. Let's look at one more question. So this says you have to provide grant anonymous user permission to access blobs. So these anonymous users should access these blobs in a specific container. What should you do? See, if earlier in the example we saw, if you have external vendors, you definitely know. For example, TCS is a vendor of a certain client, and they know that they want to provide TCS access for 1 year. So they will go with access keys, shared or SAS, one of A or B, they can go ahead with. But in this case, these are anonymous users. If you want to give anonymous users access, the only way is public access for the blob service. So if you see this article, you can refer configure anonymous public read access for containers and blobs. This is doable. Hence, D is the right option. Let's look at one more question. One more question on access. You are developing an application that uses data lake storage. This is a data lake storage, and you want to provide access to specific applications like Salesforce to access it. So what will you do in this case? So the first option says Azure Active Directory identities. Now, what are identities? What are identities? Option A. Let us check this. So this is this documentation. So again and again, if developers have to manage the secrets and credentials, instead of that, they can create identities and identity for Azure resource in AD. A very different purpose, not specific to our answer question here. Let's scan the last two options, account keys and role assignment. See, this works not for limited time period. If there's a limited time period, SES is the best option. Role assignments that can be permanent. Even identities you can create which can be permanent. But SAS is totally temporary. You can make it accessible for 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year, whatever you need. Hence, I'm striking out option C and D, and B is the right answer. Let's see one more. So this question says, so you have a table name customers, and this customers has credit card information. This has to be not visible. So you must prevent all salespeople from viewing or inferring the credit card information. This is a keyword. They should not be able to see the or infer the credit card information. What should you do? It's a simple thing. It's a normal database thing. You should do data masking. Okay, row level security is a different thing where you are providing access to the row based on certain set of privileges. But here it is masking. Nobody should ever see the data. At least the sales people should not see the data, and there are specific unmasking routines used for that. Now some may ask me why not encryption. So why data masking, why not encryption? So the difference between data masking and encryption is this: the most fundamental difference between encryption keeps original data transformed into encoded data, and original data is retrieved from it. And masking, no transformation is allowed; just original data is protected. This is the difference. So here we don't think so encryption is needed. So in Azure there is a credit card masking method also, and this can be used for masking the credit card information. Hence, in this case, data masking is the right option. Row level security, column level security is a very different thing where you are hiding a row based on the access, or you're hiding a row based on or column based on the access privileges that user has. But this here it is saying you have to people should not be able to access the credit card information at all. So masking is the right option here. Let's see one more question. So this is a question you are planning to you are planning a big data solution in Azure, and it has to be optimized for batch processing, auto scaling, or cluster scaling, etc. Which technology will we use? So in this case, if you see first one, data warehouse. So data warehouse doesn't use cluster; it actually uses HD inside clusters. So data warehouse, I'm just removing it from here. So when we talk about data warehouse, it is actually SQL data warehouse. Let's look at HD inside. So the options here should be SD Insight and Databricks because both have batch processing capabilities, has ETL, auto scaling, plus cluster scaling. Both has it. Probably this was the old question, but when SD Insight didn't have auto scaling, but now SD Insight also has auto scaling. So I'm not sure how in the new world probably they will give you two options. Okay, that's what I'm seeing in some of the documentation or websites. So these two options are correct. Analysis services, you can use analysis services to build data models, and then your Power BI applications and etc can use those data models. So it's a very different service, and so we should go ahead with these two options. So this question says you store data in data warehouse in Azure Snap Analytics, and you need to design a solution to ensure that the data warehouse and the most current data is available within 1 hour. So basically, whenever a disaster strikes, there are two parameters for disaster recovery: RPO and RTO. So it's saying that the warehouse should be available within 1 hour of data center failure. So these three actions is required here. So the first one says each day restore the data warehouse from a geo-redundant backup to a available Azure region. So see, this question is about if a disaster occurs, then you have to do it. Here, the disaster has not occurred. So why will you always keep taking a geo-redundant backup to an available? I mean, see, restore the data warehouse from a geo-redundant backup. So why will you restore it? You will restore it only after a disaster strikes. So this option is wrong. So here, option B, if a failure occurs, update the connection strings to point to the recovered data warehouse. Okay, yeah, this can be done if a data warehouse has been recovered. Since we have three options to be selected, so let's park this for now because this is not the first step. This probably would be the second or the last step. So we have to choose three options here. So let's see option 3, option C. If a failure occurs, modify the Azure firewall rules of the data warehouse. So, okay, for option A, I had told that disaster has not occurred. So this is a post-disaster occurrence scenario. So even if that is the case, so you would not take a backup in a zero-redundant backup. Okay, so these are the answers, but I'm not very much convinced with this question itself. I saw this question on the web. I was trying to make an attempt to answer it, but the question should say at which point they are talking about post recovery. If it's a post recovery, then I'm not sure why each day you will restore it. You will do a one time restoration. Um, let's look at the next question. So this question, you are designing the security of a SQL database. You are having a AD group, and you want to recommend a solution to provide group one with read access to database only. So in this case, we cannot use SAS because SAS is used for temporary access to the file systems, uh, some data lake storage or something of that sort. SQL login is just to get login for a particular user, not for a group. RBAC role-based access is also for a user, not for a group. For a group in a database, you have a contained database user. So here, this is a link, and here goes the description for it. So using for user groups, you can put Azure Directory users into a group, AD group, and create content database user for the group. So that's our answer. This is our answer. So here we have the next question. You need to recommend a security solution for containers in blob storage. The solution must ensure only read permissions are granted to specific user. So options here are SaaS. So SaaS, you can provide low level granularity, like here it requires read permissions only for a specific container. So for a specific container, it will provide lower granularity of access. Public read access for blobs is if you have anonymous people who are accessing, then you can give a public read access to blobs. Not applies to this because it is saying specific container. It is not an anonymous user. Access keys can be used, but access keys will provide access to at a account level. That means all folders, files, they will the using the key you can have read write whatever access to all objects under that account, which is not needed. We need a much lower level of granularity, that is read permissions for a specific container, hence SAS is the answer. Let's look at the next question. So we saw a similar question, but in this case the options are different. So the solution given here, so the question says that you have SPI data, and i- it is in a column, and whenever queries are executed against it, against that PII data, it should be tracked, and you should be able to review that data in Azure Monitor, and that data should be available for 45 days. The solution they have given is you create a select trigger on the table in SQL database that writes the query to a new table, then executes stored procedure that looks up the column classifications. So in this case, mm, we saw is we have to first create a column classification, and then that can be we can enable the audit, which can write to a blob store that those audit logs, and that written or log analytics, and that can be retained for up to 730 days. So in this case the answer is no. Let's see question number 24. So it says this: you plan to use Azure SQL database to support a line of business. So this also has sensitive data. You need to identify the sensitive data and monitor access to the data. It's similar to the previous question. So you have to choose three options. So like what we discussed in the previous question is, first you have to classify the data which is sensitive. You have to do a classification. So A is the first thing. You enable data discovery and classification. Then you need to enable auditing. C is the one, because this auditing will write data to log analytics, which can have 730 days of up to 730 days of retention. So A and C, and then one more option. So use advanced threat protection. This is something which is important here, because you would want to safeguard your sensitive data. So you should use advanced threat protection for it. So now if you compare option D and E, which one should be the right option? Let's look at vulnerability assessment. So Azure Defender's assessment solution is used. It is primarily used on hybrid machines or virtual machines. So or it can be used on premises also. So the main purpose is, so core component of every cyber risk and security program is the identification and analysis of vulnerabilities. So this is actually enabled on your virtual machines. It supports both Azure machines and hybrid machines. Okay, so primarily what it is looking at is if your machines are vulnerable or not. So this is mostly with respect to network and etc. Okay, so basically what it does is it also does a health check. So it will tell you how many machines or resources are healthy, how many are unhealthy, and how many are not applicable. So it does a health check. Now let's look at advanced threat protection. So here it is giving you uh, advanced threat protection. And what does it do? It identifies, detects, and investigates advanced threats, compromised identities, malicious insider actions. This is what it identifies. So what do we need for our question? We will need option E. And option D, vulnerability assessment will only give you the health of the virtual machines. But advanced threat protection, with your sensitive data, you need advanced threat protection to understand that nobody is trying to hack in into your data. So we will strike out D. Now, what is TDE? This is used for encryption at rest. The entire database is encrypted using symmetric key called database encryption key. So the question says you need to identify sensitive data. In order to identify, you have to do classification. If you encrypt the whole database, uh, that is not a solution to identify the sensitive data. You need to identify it first, and then you have to monitor access to the data. Hence, the right options here are options A, C, and E. Let's look at the next question. Let's look at the next question. So this is a company stores sensitive information about customers and employees in Azure SQL database, and that sensitive data should remain encrypted in transit and at rest. Let's look at the option TDE, option A. So TDD is for encryption at rest only. It does not work for encryption in transit. So we will strike this out. Next option is C, Azure Disk Encryption. So Azure Disk Encryption is for VMs and not for database. It works only for VM. So whatever the storage of VM is, it will encrypt that disk, fully encrypt. Hence we will strike this option. So the last option, D, SQL Server always on. So this makes the database highly available. Okay, this is not for encryption. It's just to make it highly available, always on. Hence we will strike this option. So that leaves us with always encrypted with secure enclaves. So first let us understand what is always encrypted. Always encrypted is your database fully is encrypted always. And if you want to do some sort of processing, the limitation of this is any sort of processing you have to do. You have to take that data to a client and process the data here to understand. So you might have to unencrypt it, and do some processing, and so that is a very tedious process and not a secure process. And this was a limitation because you always want to process something or understand what sort of data is there. So on the other hand, the always encrypted with secured enclaves, what it does is, so it pulls the data in the memory, it does some kind of processing, and then it processes and takes the data, understands the data, whatever. So this memory cannot be accessed by any other application, any other system, etc. It's perfectly safe. So the data is encrypted in transit and at rest also. In transit, the data is encrypted here. Sorry, this is in rest, data is encrypted here, and when it moves to in memory and for some processing, the data is encrypted in transit also. Hence, option B would be the correct answer. Let's move to the next question. So the question says telemetry data solution that supports analysis of log files in real time. Which two technologies should you use? So it's a telemetry solution. That means it's an IoT based solution. And whenever IoT comes into place, IoT Hub and Event Hub are definitely used. And then it says analysis of log files. If they want to do analysis of log files, the first thing is Stream Analytics could have been used in the real-time analytics of log files. We can plug Power BI on Stream Analytics and do it. Since that is not in the option, the second option is Databricks, where we can take the data in the Databrick and perform log analysis there. So quickly look into this diagram. Usually, whenever telemetry data is involved, that means there is some kind sort of IoT data. This comes into Azure Event Hub, and then you have two options. You put Azure Streams, and then you plug Power BI here for real-time analytics, or you take it into a data lake. Or instead of data lake, you can. In this case, we are taking it into a Databricks solution. So if you see this documentation, it talks about how Azure Databricks can be integrated with Spark cluster, oh sorry, with the Event Hub here, Event Hub, and connect to the Azure Databricks to process the messages coming through. Okay, so this is possible here. So this will provide near real-time analytics. For real-time, you should go to Azure Stream Analytics, but that is not an option here. Now let us quickly look at what is the difference between IoT Hub and Event Hub. So IoT Hub is a cloud gateway that connects IoT devices to gather data and drive business insights. And Event Hubs are uses a partition consumer model to scale out your stream and integrate it with big data and analytics services, including Databricks, Stream Analytics, etc. So that's why we are using Event Hubs so that Event Hubs can integrate with Databricks. IoT Hub cannot integrate with Databricks; it has to go through Event Hubs. That's why we are choosing Event Hub over IoT Hub. So the right options are options A and C. So let's look at the next question. So this is a question: you are designing an audit strategy for SQL database, and you need to provide real-time notifications for potential security breaches. The solution must minimize the development effort. So the question is, the problem statement is, which destination should you include in the recommendation? It is asking for the destination. It is not asking how will you monitor or those. If you have to monitor this, you will use Azure Monitor Services. But since it's asking for a destination, whenever the audit strategies you are building, you always put the destination as log analytics. You just memorize this. There is, uh, I mean, there is no rocket science in it. You never put it in any of these things. You put it in log analytics so that your Azure Monitor can pick it from the log analytics and do some real-time monitoring. So these options are not correct. So blob storage, even if you put blob storage, then you have to move it back. How will you do the analysis? How will the Azure Monitor reach to these? Even data warehouse is not a place where you will put the audit logs. And event hubs is not a place for audit logs. It is a place where IoT or telemetry data can connect, and then you can stream that data using stream analytics and etc. Hence option D is the right option. Let's look at the next question. You need to design a real-time stream solution that uses Azure functions to process data uploaded to Azure Blob storage. The solution must meet the following requirements: support up to 1 million blobs, scaling must occur automatically, cost must be minimized. So if you see this, these are the plans. Consumption plan, it scales automatically. That is what the question is asking for. The question says scaling must occur automatically. Then the question also says costs must be minimized. So costs are minimized because scaling happens automatically. So the functions host are dynamically added or removed, and that will save your cost. And you're paying only when the functions are running, so that saves your cost. So consumption plan is right. But let's look at dedicated plan or app service plan. This is the same. So it runs the functions within app service plan at regular rates, best for long running scenarios where durable functions can't be used. And these are the scenarios when you should put a app service plan. You have existing underutilized VMs, or you want to provide a custom image on which to run your functions, or predictive scaling and cost. So these are manual. You have to do a manual scaling here actually. So now we are clear that consumption plan has to be used. So it has to be one between B and C. So when 1 million blobs has to be supported, and it's a real-time stream, so event trigger will support, because blob trigger, the pooling takes time. It will pool and then compare and see if there are incremental files, and if there are, then it will uh, activate or send messages. So event trigger is better because uh, it is as real time as possible, and it works with higher volumes as well. So the correct option is option B. Let's go to the next question. The question says, company purchases IoT devices to monitor manufacturing machinery. The company uses IoT appliance to communicate with these IoT devices, and the company must be able to monitor the devices. Basically, the company has bought IoT devices and they have an IoT appliance and they want to monitor these devices in real time. So you need to design a solution. Out of these options, what should we use? So first option, option A, data factory instance using PowerShell, and option D. So both will not work. The reason is data factory is a ETL, and in ETL is always useful for batch processing. It is not useful for real time processing. Here they are saying monitor the devices in real time. So real time you need something like stream analytics. But before that, let's look at option B. So this is option B. Uh, Analysis services is basically you create a data model there, and so that your Power BI and other applications can use it. So this is also not a solution to monitor the devices in real time. It has nothing to do with real time monitoring. So B is wrong. Stream Analytics is used for real time, and you can use it from Azure PowerShell or Azure Portal. In the exam nowadays, you are also getting Azure Portal as instead of PowerShell, but it is also correct. So the correct answer is option C. Let's look at the next question. Same question, but different options. So in this case also, like we told, data factory is not useful here. Analysis service is a data model service. So only thing left is analytics stream analytics edge application, and using Microsoft Visual Studio, that is also correct. Hence option C is the correct option. Let's see the next question. Let's look at the next question. So the question is saying you plan to ingest streaming social media data by using Azure Stream Analytics. So you have something like Twitter, that is your social media, and you have Stream Analytics, and the data will be stored in files in data lake storage. So data will be stored in file in a data lake storage, and then consumed by Databricks, and Polybase in SQL data warehouse. So you need to recommend a Stream Analytics output format, this orange color, which format the stream analytics should output, so that everybody can query it properly with fewest possible error. And the solution must ensure that the files can be queried quickly and the data type information is retained. So this format we have to choose now. So in this case, let's look at the options: Avro, CSV, Parquet, and JSON. Now you can use any of the format, but which format will work best for read? For write operations, Avro works best. For read operations, Parquet works best from a performance standpoint. So hence our option would be Parquet. Option C would be the correct answer. So this brings us towards the end of part 5 of this video series. Please subscribe to my channel.